Welcome back to English from A to Z. We are diving deep today into a really fascinating category of stocks. We're talking about the ones that generate just, well, astronomical returns, the true ultra high growth companies. This deep dive is really about getting into the DNA of that explosive growth. I mean, when you look back, say, over the last 10 years, the numbers are just they're kind of shocking, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about companies that weren't just winners, they were like market dominators. You look at NVIDIA, up 31,000%.
Incredible.
AMD, 6,900%. Shopify, 5,300%. These aren't just, abstract numbers on a screen. These are genuinely life-changing gains.
And, if you really dig into the fundamental thing they all had in common, the crucial element, right? It wasn't just like a single hit product. It was sustained, strong, double-digit revenue growth year after year. We're talking companies consistently growing that top line, 20%, 30%, sometimes even faster. That continuous compounding of revenue, that's the real DNA of these, market monsters.
We saw a pretty amazing example of that acceleration just recently with Palantir, didn't we? That stock went from, what was it, like a pretty sluggish 12% annual revenue growth.
The market hated that.
Right. And then all the way up to 48% in a recent quarter.
And that inflection point,
Yeah.
that moment where the growth just drastically speeds up, that is everything in this space. Palantir really proved it. When a company shifts from, let's say, okay growth or even slow growth to genuinely explosive growth, well, the market just re-rates it almost instantly.
Wow.
And that acceleration led to, was it over 2,000% gain for investors who managed to hold on through that shift.
Just think about what that kind of performance does for a portfolio, especially if you manage to get in relatively early. If you started with a small amount of money, you're probably well off now. If you were already doing okay, maybe you're rich. And if you were already rich, well, now you're talking super rich territory. It's an absolute game changer. It really defines a generation for some investors.
So that's really our mission today. We want to break down the specific ingredients, the strategies of several of these ultra-high growth or UHG companies. That's the term we'll use, meaning those delivering sustained, massive double-digit growth on the top line.
Okay.
We need to understand not just, what makes their businesses boom, but also, and this is critical, what kind of investor mindset you absolutely need to have. Because you have to withstand the incredible risk, the volatility that just naturally comes with this level of potential return.
And that brings us straight to probably the most crucial warning we have to give right up front. These ultra high growth stocks, they come with major, and I mean life testing, volatility.
Absolutely. Critical point.
If you are not mentally prepared for what that looks like, seeing your investment drop dramatically, you just shouldn't own them. Full stop. This is non-negotiable.
Yeah, this extreme volatility, it's simply the price of admission. It's the cost you pay for that potential exponential upside. I've been watching the market for 17 years now, and literally every single high growth company I've ever seen, every single one, went through dramatic corrections, crashes even.
And we're not talking small dips here.
No, not 5 or 10%. We've seen these stocks plummet 20%, 30, 40, even 50% sometimes.
Wow.
And often within a single quarter, or maybe just over a few months. It can be brutal.
It almost sounds less like investing and more like some kind of psychological stress test. Like it's designed specifically to shake out anyone with weak conviction.
It absolutely is. In practice, let's use that ant on a waterfall analogy again, right? If you aren't mentally prepared, if you haven't steeled yourself, you will be thrown out. The market volatility will just wash you away because you'll inevitably panic during one of those 40% down moves. It's human nature. The really big money, those exponential gains, they only go to the investors who have the resolve. And maybe more importantly, the fundamental belief and the underlying business model,
Mm.
to just hold on through those really vicious drawdowns, you have to understand that the volatility is just inherent to the opportunity itself.
And often, what triggers that panic isn't just the growth maybe slowing down a bit, it's the valuation that comes with it, right? We always see these UHG companies trading at much higher price to earnings ratios, PE ratios, and much higher price to sales ratios than your average, mature, steady stock. How do you coach someone through buying a stock that on paper just looks expensive by all the traditional metrics?
Yeah, that's a great question. You have to fundamentally grasp why it's expensive. What's the justification? This is where I think the F1 car versus the Honda Civic analogy really helps clarify things. Think of a Honda Civic.
Mm.
That's your average stock,
Correct.
right? Maybe a stable utility company or some legacy industrial firm. It's relatively cheap, it's dependable, and it'll get you from point A to point B just fine. No surprises. It's priced based on its current, very predictable capabilities.
It does exactly what it says on the tin, basically.
Yeah,
And you pay a fair price for a pretty linear, predictable outcome.
exactly right. But then you have these ultra-high growth stocks.
Mm.
Those are the F1 cars. An F1 car is engineered, it's built, it's meant to do very, very special things. Things that create massive competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a corner at 100 miles per hour, something you'd never, ever expect the Civic to do. And because its capabilities are just fundamentally different on another level, well, you can't expect an F1 car to be priced the same as a Honda Civic. It just costs more because it has the potential for that explosive exponential performance.
Okay, so when we're looking at that high PE or that high price to sales ratio,
Uh-huh.
we're not really paying for what the company is today based on its current net income or sales. We're actually paying for what it's expected to become, factoring in that compounding effect of its rapid growth.
Precisely. That's the crucial insight. These companies are essentially expected to grow into those seemingly expensive valuations over time if they execute. If they hit that 30% plus revenue growth plan perfectly, then the present value of all their future cash flows, even heavily discounted because they're far off in the future, still justifies today's high price.
Right.
And if they do execute, the price you pay today, which seems expensive now, will actually look dirt cheap 5 years down the road because the earnings and the revenue will have just exploded to meet and probably dramatically exceed that initial expectation. That's the deal. That's the UHG contract, if you will.
Yeah. Okay, let's apply that mindset then. Let's look at our first specific example, Celsius Holdings. Now, this stock has returned, what, over 700% in the past 5 years. Incredible number. But we have to stress that volatility part again. Celsius is kind of the poster child for that ant on a waterfall test we mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. A classic case.
You had to go through a lot of pain, a lot of gut-wrenching drops to actually achieve that massive gain in the end.
Absolutely right. You had to endure countless corrections, some pretty nasty crashes along the way. But still, 700% in 5 years. It
Yeah.
kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it?
It does.
Celsius is basically a major energy drink company. It really boomed over the last few years by targeting a very specific niche initially. They went after the fitness and gym culture space, differentiating themselves from those older, sugar-heavy legacy brands.
And they haven't just stood still. They've been expanding their brand portfolio to keep that growth accelerating, right?
Correct. They recently acquired Alani. That's another energy drink, also quite popular in the fitness community. But interestingly, it skews notably heavier towards a female consumer base, so that broadens their market appeal quite a bit.
Smart.
And they also acquired Rockstar from PepsiCo. Now, Rockstar is a brand that competes more directly with the big guys, Monster and Red Bull.
That raises an interesting question. Why did Pepsi sell Rockstar, which was a competing brand, and then turn around and invest heavily in Celsius? And maybe more importantly, why is that Pepsi relationship considered the real game changer here for Celsius?
Yeah, good question. Pepsi basically needed a winning strategy in the energy drink space.
Hmm.
Rockstar, frankly, was underperforming pretty dramatically. It really struggled to gain significant market share against that duopoly of Monster and Red Bull. So, by partnering with Celsius, Pepsi gets a significant stake in a genuinely explosive modern brand that's resonating with consumers. And in return, Pepsi provides Celsius with an absolute key ingredient for ultra-high growth in consumer goods: massive distribution muscle. This partnership means Celsius suddenly gains access to Pepsi's vast established distribution network all across the United States. And crucially, it sets them up perfectly for massive international expansion down the road.
Let's dig into that a bit. When we talk about distribution muscle, what does that actually look like on the ground for Celsius? How does it translate to sales?
Okay, so it means the game shifts completely. Instead of fighting for space in, say, specialized online stores or just refrigerators and gyms, suddenly you're talking about getting onto the shelves of every major supermarket, every corner store, every gas station across the country.
Right. Huge difference.
Pepsi handles all the complex logistics, the trucking, the warehousing, and maybe most importantly, the negotiations for shelf space and layout inside the stores. Getting that prime eye-level shelf space at a Walmart or a Kroger, that's a brutal zero-sum game.
I bet.
Before Pepsi, Celsius had to fight those battles basically store by store, region by region. Now Pepsi's clout just ensures they get immediate widespread penetration and optimal shelf placement. And that is what drives massive increases in sales volume.
We've seen this kind of playbook before, haven't we? With Coca-Cola and Monster Energy?
Precisely. It's almost the exact same model. Years ago, Coca-Cola made a major investment in Monster. It took about a 19% stake, I think. And both companies benefited tremendously. Monster got that essential global distribution network it needed to scale internationally. In Coke, well, they benefited from Monster's incredible stock performance and got crucial exposure to the high-growth energy drink category they were missing. Look, companies like Celsius and Monster, they're just not going to build their own global distribution networks from scratch. It's too expensive, too complex. They pretty much have to partner with a giant like Coca-Cola or Pepsi.
Interesting.
Which actually means Red Bull is now kind of the odd one out in this structure, right? They have to rely largely on their own, less leveraged, more specialized distribution system.
Okay, so looking at Celsius's recent revenue numbers, it really has been a wild ride, hasn't it? They had that explosive early growth, 104%, 94% revenue growth, incredible numbers.
Phenomenal.
But then came that major dip, the one that caused the volatility we warned about.
Yes, the infamous come down in 2023. That was directly linked to an over-ordering and over-distribution situation right after the initial Pepsi deal kicked in. Pepsi was just so aggressive in pushing the product out into the distribution pipeline.
Too aggressive, maybe.
Perhaps. Warehouses and retailers basically got overstocked.
Yeah.
And that led to some pretty rough-looking numbers for a few quarters. I think revenue was down 30% at one point, and then they finished a couple of quarters down maybe 4 to 7% as the whole system had to digest that surplus inventory.
Ouch.
It was definitely messy, but fundamentally you have to remember it was more of a distribution logistics issue, a timing thing.
Yeah.
Not really a sign that consumer demand had suddenly collapsed.
But the most recent quarter, that tells a completely different story again.
Right, yeah. The big growth days are definitely back. The latest quarter saw revenue growth just explode back up to 83%.
Wow, 83.
Yeah, and that's a huge signal. It says that the over-distribution problem is clearing out, the inventory is moving, and that massive Pepsi distribution machine is now firing on all cylinders again, absorbing the excess stock, and just moving product efficiently to meet the demand.
So if they've already captured so much market share here in the U.S. thanks to Pepsi, where does the really big long-term opportunity lie? The one that justifies that potentially still expensive F1 car valuation?
Yes. almost entirely outside the United States.
Yeah.
That international expansion,
Mm-hmm.
that's the key growth driver over the next decade, easily.
Yeah.
This is where Pepsi's global network becomes absolutely invaluable. Celsius has barely even scratched the surface in major international markets. Think Europe, Latin America, Asia.
Mm.
I mean, if you look back at Monster's growth story over the past 10, 15 years,
Yeah.
a huge chunk of that came from expanding internationally after they secured that global distribution through Coke.
Right. The playbook.
Exactly. Celsius is perfectly positioned now to mirror that exact path. And if they do,
Yeah.
well, that 700% gain over the last 5 years might actually look kind of small compared to what could happen in the next 5 or 10 years, assuming they execute well internationally.
Okay. Let's shift gears. Moving from energy drinks to beauty products. We're looking at another high flyer that's also known for high volatility, ELF Beauty. This stock's returned 551% over the past 5 years, another amazing number. But just like Celsius, you had to endure some absolutely brutal volatility moves along the way. Swings that would seriously test anyone's conviction during those drawdowns.
Yeah, ELF is a really fascinating case study in how to build a modern consumer goods company. Their incredible success really rests on two pillars that are tightly intertwined: affordability and just mastery of social media. A huge chunk of their product line is priced under $15. Many items are even under $10. That makes them incredibly accessible to the masses, right? And crucially, very appealing to younger consumers who are highly influenced by online trends and don't have huge budgets. And their social media mastery, it's not just about, having an Instagram account. It's their speed.
Yeah.
They seem to be able to identify a trend that's blowing up on TikTok, formulate a relevant product, and get it onto store shelves way faster than their big legacy competitors can react.
Wow.
They leverage micro-influencers really effectively. They create these viral online moments. It ensures they stay relevant and constantly generate buzz.
And distribution is a massive advantage for them too, right? Though maybe in a different way than it was for Celsius.
Yes, absolutely. They have massive distribution already. They're in all the major retailers: Target, Walmart, Amazon, the big pharmacy chains.
So they're everywhere.
They are. But here's the crucial insight, the nuance. It's widely believed that they are still technically under-distributed even within those stores. Basically, they're selling product much faster than the amount of shelf space they currently occupy would normally suggest.
Ah, interesting.
Retailers are often hesitant, understandably, to immediately give up valuable shelf space that's currently held by the established giants like Estee Lauder or L'Oreal.
So the potential runway for future expansion is literally measured in, feet of shelf space they still need to capture from competitors.
Exactly, you got it. And this suggests there's still a massive runway for expansion just within their existing retail partners over the next 5 years or so.
Right.
Because inevitably, retailers look at the sales data, the velocity data, and they realize, hey, we have to allocate more physical shelf space to ELF because the product is just flying off the shelves. The demand dictates it.
And their strategy hasn't just been organic growth. They've recently accelerated things through some pretty strategic acquisitions designed to broaden their appeal even further.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's become a key part of the story. They acquired Notorium, which is popular for body washes, back in 2023. That expanded them beyond just color cosmetics.
Okay.
But the real buzz, the major revenue catalyst that the market is really waiting for now, is centered around their acquisition of Rhode. That's Hailey Bieber's skincare brand. And by all accounts, Rhode is currently experiencing absolutely insane growth rates.
Yeah, I saw some data around the Road launch. It seemed like it was setting new industry standards or something.
It really did. It apparently set a new record for a celebrity brand retail debut. Rhode reportedly generated something like $15 million in first-day sales at its Sephora North America launch.
15 million in one day.
Yeah. And just to put that into context, that performance supposedly surpassed the initial retail launch numbers of huge established celebrity brands like Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty or Rihanna's Fenty Beauty. That level of immediate consumer demand is almost unheard of.
And presumably, that kind of explosive launch performance created immediate scarcity, right? Which, whether it was intentional or not, probably just fueled the hype even more.
It's the ultimate marketing tool, isn't it? Scarcity equals desirability. There were reports that multiple Sephora locations, like in New York's Soho district, sold out of the road products within hours of the rollout.
Wow.
Now, yeah, short term, those inventory challenges might suggest they maybe should have stocked more product. But in the world of high-growth consumer brands, nothing generates buzz quite like scarcity. When potential customers go into a store and see the shelves are empty because the product is just that hot, well, that buzz factor just accelerates demand for the next shipment exponentially.
Okay, but let's talk about the growth rate whiplash for ELF, because they've also had some serious volatility driven by their revenue cycles, haven't they?
They definitely have. They posted some absolutely ridiculous growth clips earlier on, like 77%, 84% revenue growth,
Yeah.
especially in that early post-pandemic phase. Just incredible. But then the last few quarters, things got decidedly, well, sleepy, you could say. Growth slowed down to just 3% and then 9%. And of course, the market sees those sleepy numbers, compares them to the earlier explosive growth, and it pulls back hard. That causes massive volatility. It's another perfect example of that UHG mindset test we talked about.
But the expert analysis, your analysis, suggests that this sleepy period is basically over now.
That's the strong belief, yes. The expectation now is that the road acquisition is going to be the slingshot, that it's going to drive truly insane revenue growth starting as early as the upcoming quarter's results.
Okay.
This is the moment that's widely expected to just knock people's socks off because the market, looking at those recent sleepy quarters, is just not prepared for the kind of revenue acceleration that's believed to be about to hit their income statement from road.
So what's the projection then based purely on that anticipated revenue explosion? Even acknowledging that profitability growth often takes a backseat to just pure top-line expansion during this kind of phase.
Well, if those growth rates really do hit, say, 40 or even 50% clips, and the belief is they will, driven by RoadPed, then the stock is projected by many analysts to head towards $200, maybe even higher, possibly within the next 9 months or so.
Wow, just based on revenue.
Yet this projection is being driven purely by the quantitative analysts, the number crunchers, recognizing that that level of revenue acceleration fundamentally justifies paying the F1 car valuation again. They're essentially transitioning, right, from being just a single brand, high-growth niche player to becoming a genuine multi-brand, multi-category beauty conglomerate.
And this acquisition strategy, it's not just a one-off move for Rode, is it? It seems like it's part of a much bigger long-term corporate vision. Like they're positioning themselves to be the next major beauty holding company.
Exactly. That seems to be the playbook.
Yeah.
ELF is widely expected to continue buying out other smaller, successful, socially relevant beauty brands. They seem to be following a strategy very similar to what Estee Lauder executed so successfully from, say, the 1980s all the way up to around 2015.
Interesting parallel.
Yeah, they're building a diverse portfolio, one that captures various different high-margin segments within the broader beauty industry. They can keep their core ELF brand super affordable and accessible, while simultaneously introducing higher-end, more trend-driven brands into their ecosystem through these acquisitions. It's a smart long-term strategy.
Okay, so we've seen how consumer sentiment, distribution, social media buzz can drive growth. Now let's look at the foundational technology that kind of enables all of this hyper growth in the first place, especially in the digital realm. Our third deep dive moves firmly into the technology space, and we're focusing on a stock that honestly often gets forgotten in the ultra high growth conversation simply because it's already so massive. Meta Platforms.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook because of its size.
Right. But yet, its latest quarter showed incredibly powerful growth, 21.6%. It is still an absolute beast that you can pretty much count on growing close to a 20% clip, even now.
Meta is the very definition of a tech leviathan, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about the platforms that own Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and now Threads. The sheer scale is just staggering. Instagram alone is now apparently up to 3 billion users globally.
3 billion. Wow.
Yeah, and Threads, which is their competitor to X, formerly Twitter, is already over 300 million users. These are just massive, massive growth engines. Even if Facebook itself, the core platform, seems relatively mature in some markets. And the key opportunity, the thing everyone really needs to focus on for the next 5 years. The reason Meta arguably remained the UHE candidate, despite its enormous size, is WhatsApp.
Okay, what's that?
It is still widely considered to be in the very early days of its monetization cycle. That promise, that potential to finally realize significant revenue and profit from a platform with that kind of global reach and daily utility, it's just monumental. We could be talking about potential billions in brand new high-margin revenue streams opening up over the next few years.
And they are certainly spending an absolute fortune to fuel that future growth, aren't they? Particularly on AI and the underlying infrastructure. We see these astronomical capex investment numbers, buying massive amounts of chips, building huge data centers. For our listener, maybe just clarify quickly what capex is and why Meta is spending quite so aggressively right now.
Sure. So CapEx, or capital expenditures, is simply the money a company spends to buy, upgrade, and maintain its physical assets. In Meta's case, that's primarily the incredibly powerful computer chips needed for AI and the huge facilities the data centers require to run their complex AI models and serve billions of users every day.
Got it.
Now, Zuckerberg, historically, he does not spend aggressively like this. We're talking, say, $20 billion a quarter on CapEx, unless he is extremely confident in a much, much bigger future payoff.
Right, it's a calculated bet.
It's a huge bet. He's essentially betting that $20 billion spent now on things like AI training infrastructure and next-gen data centers will yield many, many times that amount back in future advertising revenue and efficiency gains over the next 5 to 10 years.
And that investment isn't just about software algorithms, is it? It seems to be pushing the boundaries of innovation into hardware as well.
Absolutely. They are right at the forefront of AI technology development with their Llama models. And interestingly, they often release these powerful models for free, open source. That forces the entire industry to advance more rapidly, which in turn probably benefits Meta's own ecosystem in the long run. And yes, they're innovating incredibly rapidly in VR, virtual reality, AR, augmented reality, and wearables too. I mean, look at the new AI-powered glasses they just launched, like the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. They're around $800, I think. The technology they're packing in, their wrist-based gesture controls, real-time AI assistance right in your view. It's pretty incredible stuff. And it really shows how far ahead they're thinking about the future of human-computer interaction beyond just the flat screen of a phone.
Now, Zuckerberg has historically faced a lot of criticism, hasn't he? Sometimes called a gambling fool for making these huge, seemingly risky bets. But history seems to prove him right again and again. Why should we trust that this current massive investment in the metaverse, AR, AI future will pay off this time?
Well, mainly because his track record really does validate the vision time after time. Remember when he acquired Instagram for $1 billion? People thought he was absolutely insane, spending that much on a photo-sharing app that was generating almost no revenue at the time.
I remember that. A lot of skepticism.
Huge skepticism. Today, if Instagram were a standalone company, it would undoubtedly be valued well into the hundreds of billions of dollars, arguably one of the most powerful media companies on the planet.
Point taken.
Same story with WhatsApp, $19 billion. Heavily questioned at the time, but now its global utility is deeply integrated into the Meta ecosystem, and it's clearly worth significantly more than they paid. And Threads, while still early, looks like a clear success as a viable competitor to X. The pattern is clear. He buys strategically, often acquiring potential threats or foundational technologies, and he only seems to overspend when he sees massive, foundational long-term leverage for the entire company.
Okay, let's just quickly explain the core driver of the actual Meta business model because it connects directly back to why businesses keep prioritizing spending their ad dollars there. You mentioned ROI, B2C, and B2B earlier. Can you maybe unpack that a little for us?
Sure. At its heart, the whole game for Meta is about making their advertisers as much money as possible. They are laser focused on delivering a high return on investment, or ROI, for every ad dollar spent on their platforms.
Okay.
They achieve this, fundamentally, by keeping users engaged on their platforms, Facebook, Instagram, etc., for longer periods of time, and by showing those users increasingly relevant ads powered by ever more sophisticated AI targeting algorithms. It's simple math.
Mm.
If the advertisers get a fantastic ROI, let's say they spend $1 on ads and get $5 back in product sales, they're just going to keep spending more and more money with Meta. And this applies right across the business spectrum. B2C companies, businesses selling directly to consumers, they love Facebook and Instagram because they can target individuals based on incredibly specific interests, demographics, past behaviors. The accuracy is phenomenal. But increasingly, we're seeing B2B companies, businesses, selling to other businesses using these platforms very effectively too, mainly for generating leads and building brand awareness within specific industries or job functions. Honestly, if you talk to almost any small, mid-size, or even large business owner today about where they prioritize their digital advertising budget, the first two platforms they mention are almost always going to be Facebook and Instagram. Why? Because they consistently get the best, most measurable results there. And that efficiency is what secures Meta's massive revenue stream.
Okay, so given that underlying stability and the future opportunities, especially with WhatsApp, what does this all mean for you, the listener, in terms of a concrete financial projection? Can we get into those detailed long-term numbers you mentioned for, say, 2029?
Yes, absolutely. We've put together some detailed projections looking out to 2029, and they really solidify why Meta, despite its current massive size, is still considered by many to be an ultra-high growth company. We really need to look at three potential scenarios or cases. Let's start with the optimistic one, the bold case. This assumes Meta absolutely nails the monetization of WhatsApp and Threads, maybe faster than expected. And it also assumes they see massive commercial success from their AI llama models, perhaps licensing them or building new services on top. So in this scenario, we assume 20% average annual revenue growth and maybe slightly faster net income growth, say 22% through 2029, due to operating leverage.
Okay.
Now, if you apply a target PE ratio in the range of 35 to 45, which seems reasonable for that kind of sustained growth and market dominance, that puts the projected stock price somewhere between $2,200 and $2,800 per share by 2029.
Wow, from where it is now.
Yeah. That represents a compound annual growth rate, or KGR, of roughly 31 to 39% per year. So the takeaway is you definitely have not missed all the potential upside on Meta, even now.
Okay, that's the bold case. What about the more grounded base case? What's generally expected, perhaps, given their sheer size already?
Right, the base case is more conservative. But it still assumes pretty healthy growth, especially when you consider how undermonetized large parts of their user base, particularly WhatsApp, still are. Here, we model a more moderate 15% average annual revenue growth and maybe 18% net income growth through 2029.
Still very strong numbers.
Absolutely. Now, with a slightly lower target PE ratio, maybe in the range of 29 to 34, that still puts the projected stock price between $1,600 and $1,800 by 2029. That translates to a compound annual growth rate somewhere in the low 20% range. And honestly, that 15% revenue growth might even prove conservative. If they successfully monetize just a small fraction of that global WhatsApp user base through new business features or payments, those growth numbers could easily jump significantly higher.
Okay, and finally, let's look at the downside, the bear case. Let's assume, hypothetically, a massive worldwide recession hits the global economy and advertising revenues take a major hit for maybe 1 or 2 years.
Right? The awful scenario. In that situation, we'd model much slower growth, maybe just 10% average annual revenue growth and 10% net income growth through 2029. Even then, applying a lower PE multiple, say, between 23 and 28, which is still a reasonable multiple for a company with Meta's market dominance and profitability, Astro. The stock price is still projected to be somewhere between $962 and $1,200 per share,
Even in the bear case.
even the bear case. That still gives you a compound annual growth rate of roughly 6 to 11% per year. So the key point here is, even in the worst-case plausible scenario, Meta is still expected to outperform the broader S&P 500 index return over that period. And that's usually when you know you've got a business that combines fundamental underlying safety with massive long-term growth potential. It's a rare combination at that scale.
All right. Our fourth ultra-high growth deep dive takes us back into the semiconductor space, looking at advanced micro devices, or AMD. Now, this one, if you just look at the past 5 years, it kind of looks like the sleepy performer compared to its direct competitor, NVIDIA, right? AMD is only up about 75% over 5 years, while NVIDIA, its main rival, is up an astonishing 1,200% in the same period. That stark comparison really defines the whole challenge and opportunity for AMD right now.
Yeah, that comparison gives you all the context you really need, doesn't it? In the AI chip race, think of it like a 400-meter dash. NVIDIA got a massive head start in the first 100 meters. They were already way out in front, heavily focused years ago on the data center and the AI training market specifically. While AMD at that time was essentially still in the starting blocks, relatively speaking. They were focused primarily on CPUs, central processing units and graphics chips for the consumer PC market. But, and this is a huge but, thanks to the really exceptional leadership of their CEO, Lisa Su, thanks to some very strategic acquisitions, especially buying Xilinx, which was crucial, and just intense internal chip design efforts over the last few years. AMD is finally genuinely in the race. And arguably, they are catching up rapidly now. They have the competitive technology now. Chips like their MI300 series and the upcoming MI350 and MI400 series. These are targeted directly at that lucrative data center AI acceleration market, both for training and inference. Just 18 months ago, a lot of people were saying AMD wasn't even really in the AI race. Now, they are absolutely in it. They're designing chips optimized not just for the initial training of these huge AI models, but also for inference, which is the actual day-to-day use of those trained models. That's potentially an even bigger market long-term.
Yeah, and the financial numbers are starting to reflect that catch-up and acceleration, right? They've apparently gone from a pretty sluggish 2% revenue growth about 6 quarters ago, all the way up to 31% in their latest reported quarter. That transition from low single-digit growth back to high double-digit growth, that's the classic UHG signpost we're looking for.
It absolutely is. But here's the key insight, I think, and potentially the big opportunity for the UHG investor looking at AMD now. Wall Street analysts, they currently seem incredibly bearish, or at least cautious, on AMD's near-term prospects. Their consensus estimates are only projecting growth of around 18 to maybe 27% over the next 5 quarters.
Which still sounds pretty good for a normal tech company.
It does. For an average tech company, that would be fantastic growth. But for a company competing directly in a foundational, truly explosive market like AI chips right now, those numbers seem potentially way too low, honestly. I think many analysts might be kind of clueless here, and history could be about to repeat itself.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on that clueless comment a little bit. The market is skeptical for a reason, isn't it? Isn't the single biggest threat for AMD The massive entrenched vendor lock-in created by NVIDIA's CUDA software ecosystem. I mean, isn't it practically impossible for AMD to truly catch up if all the developers, all the AI researchers are already comfortable writing their code specifically for NVIDIA's hardware using CUDA? How do they overcome that moat?
That is, without a doubt, the single most important risk factor. You are absolutely right to raise it. CUDA is the software platform, the programming environment that really makes NVIDIA's hardware almost indispensable for many AI workloads today. It creates massive switching costs for customers.
Right.
However, the market dynamics are changing. The really big customers, the hyperscalers, think Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, AWS, and they absolutely do not want to be beholden to just one single supplier for critical components like AI chips. That gives NVIDIA too much pricing power.
Makes sense. They want options.
They desperately want viable alternatives. And they are actively demanding more open standards, more open source software tools, and increasingly custom chip solutions tailored to their specific workloads. AMD knows this. They are prioritizing the development of open source software tools, like ROCm, as an alternative to CUDA. And crucially, they are offering custom chip design expertise, leveraging that Xilinx acquisition. AMD is essentially chasing that long-term, highly profitable, customizable enterprise segment that actively wants supplier diversity.
So you're drawing a direct parallel then to NVIDIA's own historic stock run over the past few years, suggesting that analysts might be making the same mistake twice by underestimating the potential ramp.
100%. I truly believe analysts were 100% wrong on NVIDIA initially. When NVIDIA first started really hitting that massive AI wave, analysts' expectations for their revenue and earnings growth were just way, way too low.
I remember the quarterly reports were always huge beats.
Exactly. NVIDIA would routinely come out and just blow the consensus numbers out of the water. They'd exceed their own guidance, sometimes by billions of dollars in a single quarter. Why? Because the underlying demand for AI compute was growing exponentially, not linearly like the analysts were modeling. And that is why NVIDIA stock went up 1,200%, because the market was constantly being shocked by the upside surprises. My prediction, or at least my strong suspicion, is that AMD is now poised to potentially shock analysts in a very similar way over the coming year or two. Personally, I would be shocked if AMD doesn't grow at least at a 30% clip every quarter from here on out, given the demand. The real question in my mind is whether they will actually start hitting 40%, maybe even 50% plus growth clips in some of the coming quarters. And that level of acceleration is what the market is currently not anticipating at all. So the opportunity here for the UHG investor is that massive potential for upside surprise that just hasn't been priced into the stock yet. Precisely because analysts are applying yesterday's more linear expectations to what could be tomorrow's exponential AI demand curve for AMD's products, too.
Okay, before we wrap things up, we have two sort of honorable mentions, companies that really illustrate the different kinds of risks and potential payoffs you find within this broader UHG category. First up is Kava. This is essentially the Mediterranean fast casual food concept, often compared to Chipotle in its model. It's definitely a high-growth restaurant chain.
Yeah, Kava is really intriguing because it's clearly showing those classic ultra-high growth revenue metrics, but doing it outside of the tech sector, which is relatively rare to see executed this well. They are consistently growing revenue quarter over quarter at 20% plus clips. We've seen 38%, 28% recently.
Solid numbers.
Very solid. And they still have a ton of potential new location expansion ahead of them across the U.S. over the next decade. Plus, the unit economics, how much profit each individual restaurant makes, seem to resemble Chipotle's highly successful model.
So if it meets the UHG revenue criteria, why is it just an honorable mention today and not one of our primary deep dives?
It really comes down to that sticking point we keep mentioning. Valuation, and maybe also the lack of a safety net like Celsius has with Pepsi's distribution, or the kind of multi-platform diversification that Meta enjoys. Kava currently trades at a forward PE ratio of around 111. That is extremely high,
Yeah.
especially for a restaurant business.
Yeah, that's rich.
Now, yes, if they manage to keep growing their unit count rapidly and keep same-store sales growing at, say, 25% plus per year for a very long time, then eventually that PE multiple will look cheap in hindsight. However, the risk here is just massive. For a restaurant concept, things can go wrong quickly. A slip in same-store sales growth for just a couple of quarters, maybe due to increased competition or rising food costs, or even unforeseen regulatory issues, that could hit them hard. If their growth rate disappoints even slightly, the stock could potentially crash from its current levels, maybe down to $30 or $40 a share. You are essentially paying for absolute perfection in execution for years to come, and that requires immense conviction and tolerance for potential drawdowns.
And you contrast that kind of high-risk, high-reward profile with a company like, say, Cake.
Yeah, Cake, which is the parent company that owns concepts like the Cheesecake Factory, but also newer, faster-growing brands like North Italia and Flower Child, is a good contrast. Cake is far less risky from a valuation perspective.
Mm.
It trades at a forward PE of maybe 15 or even 12, depending on estimates, much more reasonable.
Okay.
And it definitely has maybe 10 years of solid growth runway ahead,
Yeah.
driven primarily by expanding those newer concepts like Flower Child and North Italia nationally.
Mm.
But it fundamentally lacks that ultra-high growth clip. Their expected overall revenue growth for next year is only around 7%.
Right. Solid, but not explosive.
Exactly. It's a safer, well-diversified, well-managed restaurant business. But it just doesn't offer the potential UHG upside of a cava because the growth compounding is much more linear, not exponential.
Okay, that makes sense. That brings us to our final company for today, SoFi Technologies. Now, this stock is up about 158% over the past 5 years, so good performance. But we definitely have to mention the volatility here, too. It recently had a huge run-up from around $6 a share all the way to $28 before pulling back quite sharply again. So it clearly behaves like a UHG candidate in terms of price swings.
Yes, SoFi is positioned squarely in that exciting fintech space. They are leaning heavily into being a truly mobile-first, all-in-one, full-service digital bank. They are clearly capitalizing on the major generational shift, where younger demographics increasingly prioritize seamless online and mobile banking services over visiting physical branches.
Right, the branch model feels increasingly outdated.
It does. The old battle used to be fought over how many branches and ATMs do you have on the ground. That was the Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, the Chase model. The new competitive game is all about providing the best, most integrated, most user-friendly online experience. And SoFi is perfectly positioned for that shift, partly because they don't have the massive legacy costs associated with maintaining thousands of physical branches.
And their user growth numbers, their member growth figures, seem to be accelerating very rapidly.
They really are. They apparently exploded from about 8.7 million members to nearly 11.7 million members in just one single year recently. That's huge growth.
Wow.
But here's the absolutely critical thing you have to understand about SoFi's business model and why it fits the UHG profile despite maybe not having huge profits yet. The real payoff on all that customer acquisition is not immediate. It is the very definition of a long-term investment strategy.
Okay, can you explain that long payoff dynamic a bit more for the listener?
Sure. Think about the classic example of a traditional bank like Chase. When you sign up for a new checking account, they might give you a $250 sign-up bonus.
Right. You see those offers all the time.
Why do they do that?
Yeah.
They're losing money on you initially. They do it because Chase understands that if they can acquire a young customer now, they stand to make a huge amount of profit, what they call lifetime value, or LTV, off that same customer over the next 3, 5, 10, even 20 years. That profit comes from selling them higher margin products later on, like home loans, car loans, investment products, personal loans, credit cards.
Ah, okay. It's a long game. It's entirely a long game. So, SoFi's massive growth in new customers today, That's essentially a huge investment they're making now, which is expected to pay off massively in the future through successful cross-selling of more profitable financial products and just deepening those customer relationships over many years. They're building the customer base and the technological infrastructure now for what they believe will be a massive future profit engine. And here's maybe the most bullish kicker for SoFi right now. All of this massive customer growth is actually occurring despite what is arguably a horrible loan environment. You could say it's the worst environment for loan origination we've had in maybe 15 years, primarily due to high interest rates, which are really suppressing borrowing and refinancing activity across the board.
Right. Mortgages, car loans, everything's expensive. Exactly. So this suggests that when the economy eventually recovers, whenever that may be,
Yeah.
when interest rates eventually normalize and people start feeling comfortable buying cars and homes again, that positive macroeconomic shift should act like absolute rocket fuel for SoFi's business, especially for their lending segments and their overall profit margins. They're growing fast even in a headwind. Imagine what happens when they get a tailwind. Hashtag Howtrag Outro.
Well, this has been an incredibly detailed look at a really diverse group of companies, hasn't it? We've covered everything from energy drinks and cosmetics to AI chips and mobile banking. I think to summarize the key lesson here for you, the listener, ultra high growth, true UHG, is really defined by that sustained, massive, double digit revenue expansion over multiple years. But it's a huge but. That incredible growth potential almost always comes packaged with extreme major volatility. Volatility that will rigorously test your conviction, your patience, and your nerve as an investor.
Absolutely. And you really have to mentally accept and internalize that F1 car versus Honda Civic analogy we discussed. That expensive-looking valuation you often see. It's only truly justified if the company, whether it's a Celsius, an ELF, a Meta, or an AMD, actually executes its ambitious growth plan close to perfectly. They need to translate that high revenue growth into exponential earnings growth down the line. But when they do manage to execute, the kinds of opportunities they create are genuinely unique in the market. They can fundamentally reshape a portfolio's trajectory over the long term.
We've covered businesses today heavily focused on AI, on consumer staples and discretionary spending, and on financial technology. It really raises a fascinating final question for you to think about, building on that idea of potentially forgotten leviathans or underappreciated sectors.
Yeah, the question is, which sector, maybe one traditionally considered safe or even boring, perhaps something like infrastructure or agriculture technology, or maybe essential industrial materials, which of those sectors is most likely to produce the next forgotten high-growth stock? Like Meta was kind of forgotten before its big AI resurgence really took hold. Where might that rare combination of sustained, maybe 20% plus revenue growth, combined with a currently underappreciated valuation, where might that be hiding in plain sight today, poised to become the market's next unexpected F1 car? Definitely something interesting to mull over until our next deep dive.